Jennifer Rothwell's murder was a tragic case that shocked the nation. A young woman, 6 weeks pregnant, was brutally killed by the person she trusted most, her husband, Beau Rothwell. What started as a missing person case soon unraveled into a calculated crime fueled by infidelity and deception. This is the story of how an affair, a Google search, and a list of pros and cons led to a horrifying act of violence.
Jennifer Rothwell was a bright and ambitious chemical engineer living in Missouri with her husband, Beau Rothwell. Their marriage seemed stable on the surface, but hidden beneath was a web of lies and infidelity. Beau had been having an affair, a secret he desperately tried to keep from Jennifer. However, things became complicated when she announced her pregnancy in 2019. Jennifer Rothwell's case, her news was met with resistance of how deception, Jennifer's internet search history escalated into unimaginable violence. What to do if your husband is upset you're pregnant? The only solace is knowing that her killer will never walk free again. Around the same time, Beau Rothwell compiled a disturbing list weighing the pros and cons of leaving his wife. His reasons for staying included Jennifer and her family and avoiding disappointment. Reasons for leaving included better sex life and fresh start. Jennifer had no idea that her husband's mind was already made up. His frustration boiled over into rage as the weight of his double life caught up with him. On November 11, 2019, an argument erupted between the couple. Jennifer confronted him about his affair, demanding to know the woman's identity. Rothwell claimed that Jennifer lashed out verbally, accusing him of fathering another woman's child. Though later DNA tests proved him to be the father at the time, his anger spiraled out of control. He later testified that he entered a red haze, a moment of uncontrollable fury. Grabbing a mallet, he struck Jennifer in the head, leaving her disoriented. As she stumbled toward the garage door, he followed her, delivering a second devastating blow. This time, her skull cracked, and she collapsed down the basement stairs. With his wife dead, Rothwell's immediate concern became hiding his crime. He needed a plan and fast. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Rothwell dumped Jennifer's naked body in the woods, an hour away from their home. He then returned, scrubbing the crime scene with bleach. His next move was to play the concerned husband. He reported Jennifer missing, creating a facade of worry and distress, but detectives were already suspicious. Jennifer was responsible, and punctual vanishing without explanation didn't make sense. The investigation intensified when police searched the Rothwell home. They discovered blood-soaked carpets and evidence of a hurried cleanup. Security footage from nearby locations captured Rothwell discarding items in a dumpster. Adding to the growing suspicions against him, cell phone data placed him near the site where Jennifer's body was later found, further contradicting his story. After hours of questioning, Rothwell finally cracked. He led authorities to Jennifer's remains, buried under leaves and debris in a remote area. The medical examiner confirmed what police already suspected. Jennifer suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The brutality of the attack stunned investigators. Beau Rothwell was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and abandonment of a corpse. His initial defense: a crime of passion. He argued that the murder was not premeditated, but rather an impulsive act in the heat of the moment. However, prosecutors had a different perspective. They pointed to the pros and cons list, Jennifer's troubling Google search, and the methodical cleanup as clear signs of premeditation. The case was building against him, and soon he would have to face justice. The trial of Beau Rothwell began in April 2022, drawing national attention. Prosecutors painted him as a manipulative husband who had meticulously planned his wife's murder. Jennifer's family sat in the courtroom, forced to relive the horror of her final moments. They listened as prosecutors detailed how Beau had been actively planning to escape his marriage. The Google searches, the pros and cons list, and the bleach-soaked carpets were presented as irrefutable evidence. Despite his attempts to argue that the murder was a moment of blind rage, the jury wasn't convinced. The brutality of Jennifer's death indicated a level of force that went beyond an impulsive act. Prosecutors argued that Rothwell's methodical disposal of the body and evidence cleanup suggested clear intent to kill and cover up the crime. In a moment of final desperation, Rothwell apologized to Jennifer's family, stating, "This should have never happened." But his words did little to sway the court. After days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and corpse abandonment. In July 2022, Beau Rothwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but it offered little comfort to Jennifer's grieving family. Her mother, Robin von Hazen, spoke through tears. "Jennifer was a bright light in our lives. We thought we would have more than 28 years with her."
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a case that's it's a real reminder that appearances can be deceiving. We're talking about a missing person case, a seemingly picture-perfect marriage, and a twist. Well, you'll see.
Yeah, this one, the case of Jennifer Rothwell. It really shows how a carefully constructed facade, it can hide a much darker truth.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
We got a lot to work with in this case. Police reports, court transcripts, even some digital records from Jennifer and her husband, Beau. And believe me, there are clues hidden everywhere.
That's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? We're going to unpack everything leading up to Jennifer's disappearance. We'll look for those subtle signs that, looking back, maybe they pointed to something terrible.
Okay, so let's set the scene. November 2019, Troy, Missouri. Jennifer Rothwell, a successful chemical engineer, vanishes. Her husband, Beau, he's the one who reports her missing. And from the outside, they looked like the perfect couple.
But as investigators started digging, well, some cracks began to show in that picture of marital bliss. One of the first things that popped up, Jennifer's internet search history. Just days before she disappeared, she searched, "What to do if your husband is upset? You're pregnant."
Hold on. Pregnant? She was pregnant.
She was. And it seems like Beau, well, he wasn't thrilled about it. In fact, while Jennifer was researching pregnancy, Beau, he was busy with a different kind of list. A pros and cons list about leaving his wife.
Okay, that's a little creepy. What kind of pros are we talking about here?
Some of them were pretty surface level, better sex life, fresh start, that kind of thing. But it's the cons that are really revealing. He wrote down things like Jennifer and her family and avoiding disappointment.
So it sounds like he was, weighing the hassle of a divorce against, the perks of starting over.
Right.
And Jennifer, her feelings, their life together, it's like he didn't even factor that in.
It's a pretty cold, detached way to look at things. Yeah. And it gets a whole lot more disturbing when you consider what happened next.
You mean the murder?
Yeah. On November 11th, 2019, Jennifer confronted Beau. She'd found out about an affair he was having, and it led to this huge argument where, according to Beau, Jennifer accused him of fathering another woman's child.
And that's when he just Snap.
That's what he says. He claims he was overcome by what he called a red haze, the sudden rage, claims it clouded his judgment.
That's like he's going for that crime of passion defense.
It's a pretty common strategy, especially in cases like this. The perpetrator claims they acted impulsively in the heat of the moment, but in this case, the prosecution argued that the evidence, it pointed to something else, something more planned.
What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Well, think about the brutality. Beau didn't just lash out. He got a mallet, hit Jennifer twice in the head, hard enough to make her fall down the basement stairs.
Okay, yeah, that doesn't sound like a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Exactly. And then there's what he did after. He didn't call for help or anything. Instead, he drove Jennifer's body to this wooded area about an hour from their home and just dumped it.
Classic covering his tracks.
Right. And he went all out. He went back home, cleaned the entire crime scene with bleach, trying to wipe away any trace of what he did.
It's starting to feel like he had it all planned out.
And that's exactly what the prosecution argued. They said the pros and cons list, the internet searches, that calculated cleanup, it all pointed to premeditation.
So not a snap decision. He considered leaving her, weighed the options, then took steps to eliminate her from the picture.
And get this, after getting rid of Jennifer's body and cleaning up, Beau reported her missing, acted like the concerned husband.
That's chilling. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he's trying to trick the police.
But that carefully constructed facade, it wasn't going to hold up forever.
What happened next?
Well, the investigators, they started noticing these inconsistencies in Beau's story, and they began to suspect foul play. Jennifer, everyone knew she was responsible. She wouldn't just vanish, and her belongings were all still at home.
The pieces just weren't adding up. So the cops, they're thinking Beau's involved right from the start. But what did they actually find? What linked him to Jennifer's disappearance?
Well, when they searched the Rothwell house, they found blood-soaked carpets and signs that someone tried to clean up in a hurry. That goes directly against what Beau was saying at first. And then there's the digital trail, right? Security footage showed Beau dumping stuff in a dumpster, and his cell phone data, well, it put him right near where they eventually found Jennifer's body. Remember that hour-long drive?
Oh yeah, the one to get rid of the body. It's all coming together now. So did Beau stick to his story? Did he keep saying he was innocent through all this?
At first, yeah. But they had more and more evidence, and the police, they kept questioning him, and eventually Beau, he cracked. He confessed.
It's kind of crazy how often is that digital stuff, the phones and computers, that really breaks a case open.
It's getting tougher and tougher to lie when your phone and your computer are telling a different story. In this case, all those attempts to cover his tracks online, well, they ended up helping to put him away.
So he confesses. Did he tell them where the body was?
He did. He finally told them where he'd left Jennifer's body. A pretty awful discovery, but it gave the prosecution the evidence they needed.
I can't even imagine what Jennifer's family went through. All that time, not knowing, and then to find out it was her husband.
It's just unimaginable, the grief of losing their daughter, and then the horror of knowing her husband, someone they trusted. He's the one who did it.
So we've got the confession, the body. What's next?
The medical examiner, they confirmed that Jennifer died from blunt force trauma to the head. Just like what would happen with a mallet, like Beau said he used.
But wait, wasn't Beau still saying it was a crime of passion? With a confession and everything, how could they even argue that?
It all comes down to how they define premeditation legally. The prosecution, they said all Beau's actions, the list, the cleaning, all of it, that showed he planned it, that he meant to kill her, that's first-degree murder. But the defense, they stuck with the story that Beau just snapped, that it was an emotional outburst, that he couldn't control himself.
So it's like two different ways to see the same story. Premeditated versus totally out of control.
Exactly. And the jury, they had to decide which story made more sense. The trial, it got a lot of attention. People all over the country were watching. It really made people think about domestic violence, about how complicated it can be, and how hard it can be to prove something was planned in court.
Sounds heartbreaking. So many lives destroyed by one act of violence.
It really shows you how important it is to understand abusive relationships, to see the warning signs before it goes too far.
Okay, so we've got the evidence, the confession, the trial. What happened? What did the jury decide?
They deliberated for days, and in the end, they found Beau Rothwell guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abandoning a corpse.
Wow, guilty on everything. So the crime of passion thing, the jury didn't buy it.
Nope. They had too much evidence, and Beau's attempts to cover it all up, it backfired. They saw it as deliberate, planned out.
What about the sentencing? What happened to Beau?
July 2022, Beau Rothwell was sentenced to life in prison. no parole.
Life, no parole. That's a tough sentence. But in this case, yeah, it feels like justice was done.
It's a reminder, a harsh reminder that domestic violence, it has serious consequences. Beau's actions, they took a life, tore apart a family, and in the end, he lost his own freedom. And even with the guilty verdict, that pain, that suffering, it doesn't go away.
I bet Jennifer's family was relieved, but losing her like that never really goes away.
No, it doesn't. Jennifer's mother, Robin von Hausen, she spoke at the trial. She talked about her daughter, about their grief.
Do you remember what she said?
Yeah, she said, Jennifer, she was a bright light in our lives. We thought we'd have more than 28 years with her. Just heartbreaking, you know. Really shows the tragedy of this whole thing.
It's like behind all the headlines, the court cases, there are real people whose lives are changed forever by violence.
And it reminds us how important it is to speak out against domestic abuse, to support the victims, to work to stop this from happening again and again.
I agree, but it's so big, you know? What can one person do?
Yeah.
It feels overwhelming. Yeah, you're right. It does feel overwhelming. Like, where do you even start with something like this? Domestic violence, it's everywhere.
It is a complex issue for sure, but even small things, they can add up. First off, awareness. We got to know the signs, right? The warning signs, and we have to like really challenge those ideas in society that make it okay.
Okay, warning signs. Like, what should we be looking for?
It's not always like super obvious, but you can often see patterns. If someone's really jealous all the time, possessive, controlling, if they try to cut their partner off from friends and family, those are red flags. And it's not just physical, you know? Emotional abuse, verbal abuse, that can be just as bad.
What about the people going through it? The victims? What would you tell them?
I'd say, first thing, remember you're not alone. And it's not your fault. There are people who can help. A friend, a family member, a hotline, anything. Just reach out. That's the first step to getting safe.
You mentioned hotlines. Any recommendations?
Oh, for sure. The National Domestic Violence Hotline. They're amazing. Totally confidential. They'll help you figure things out, and they can connect you to people in your area who can help.
Good to know. So that's for people being abused. What about the rest of us? How can we help?
Support those organizations, fighting to stop it, you know, volunteer, donate. But even more than that, listen. Listen without judgment. Believe people when they share their stories.
Yeah. Sometimes just having someone believe you, that can be everything.
It really can. And remember, this stuff, it thrives in silence when we don't talk about it, when we look the other way. So we got to talk openly, challenge those messed up ideas, make a culture where it's just not okay.
This case, the Rothwells, it's awful. But it reminds us that this can happen anywhere, to anyone. We got to be careful, trust our gut, and speak up.
You got it. Jennifer's story, it's tragic, but maybe it can spark some change. Make us look closer, you know? Pay attention to those little signs. Step in if something feels off. If you're going through this, if someone you know is, there's help out there. Reach out, speak up, break the silence.
Powerful stuff. Thanks for talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And to everyone listening, let's keep Jennifer's memory alive by working towards a world where everyone is safe, where love and respect are the norm, where everyone feels safe and valued in their relationships. Maybe the biggest takeaway from Jennifer's story is that unhealthy relationships, the signs are there. Maybe they're subtle, but they're there. Like a trail leading into a dark place. The question is, are we willing to see them?